Alec Peirce, Vintage Scuba. Boy, have I got some interesting stuff from you. This ought to give us a couple of laughs. But first of all, I need to show you this comic book. This is from the 60s, and this comic book, as you can see clearly, is called Diver Dan. Now, I doubt very many of you remember Diver Dan. I'm doing this specifically for my good friends down at Birds Underwater in Florida, in Crystal River, Florida. The best place, in my opinion, to go to call if you want to go manatee diving. Diane and I did this spring, and I've been down there many, many times. I used to work in Florida years ago. I have a dive store there. And this past spring, we happened to be in that area, and somebody said, call Birds, and I called Birds. Fantastic. We saw more manatees. They're not endangered. Well, anyway, we saw a lot of them. There was one in particular, apparently that wanted to take me home with her. But anyway, we had a great time, and this is for them because in Birds, they had a whole section there dedicated to Diver Dan. So while I flip through the pages, you take a look at Diver Dan and the beautiful Minerva and the Bear and Barracuda and Trigger and everybody else. I will sing the song. Okay, you ready? How's it go? He walks among creatures with frightening features. That's where you'll find Diver Dan. Anyway, there you go. Birds for you. Now, this particular episode of Vintage Scuba, I want to again share some interesting, and hopefully you'll find some of this interesting and humorous. You see, scuba diving in the 60s and 70s was really exciting. I mean, scuba diving in the 60s and 70s was, gosh, it'd be like, what would it be like, Kevin? Motocross in the 90s. It was extreme diving. Only crazy people went scuba diving. It was new and exciting. It was one of the first really modern sports where you depended on equipment and you went into crazy, wild, dangerous environments. Yeah, like the reefs in Florida, you know what I mean? But in those days, back in the 60s and 70s, there had been no scuba diving prior to that. And anybody that was a scuba diver was a real risk taker. And so the scuba diving sport was so popular, so exciting, that all the manufacturers of other products climbed on board and said, hey, if we want to sell, then all we have to do is get a scuba diver to use our product and it'll sell. Hence, take a look. Exactly, cigarettes. So if you want to sell Newport cigarettes, you get a couple of divers. It doesn't hurt that one of the divers happens to be pretty, but anyway, there's another one. And this was very, very common. Very, very common. And a lot of these had messages on them as well. So they might say things like, when Bob finishes his commercial dive to 200 feet and does so-and-so and so-and-so, then he comes to the surface, and guess what he does? He has a camel. Makes him feel good afterwards. So this was the kind of thing that was going on. So these products, which today we don't usually associate with scuba diving, in fact, we don't associate with scuba diving, were very common back then. Here's another example. You would normally associate whiskey. But anyway, there's an ad, a full-page ad in a magazine with scuba divers having whiskey or beer, you know, beer. This gentleman here is very famous. This is Art Pinder, world champion spearfisherman many, many years ago. And there is Art Pinder, and obviously he is saying, man, this tastes good. And if you're a scuba diver and a famous spearfisherman like me, then you ought to be drinking this brand. Now here's an interesting one. This is not alcohol, but it certainly is drinks. This is Canada Dry. And there's a whole line of all the Canada Dry drinks right there. And a young man, he's got a net with him, and so he's not really a scuba diver, but the theme is there. And the manufacturers really climbed on board for this. All kinds of I have dozens and dozens of these ads, and we pulled a few of them out, Kevin and I, just to show you today. Now here's one. The automotive industry and all of the related products for automotive was popular. So here's an ad for conical oil. And it talks about this scuba diver, 2 hose regulators and everything else. He's down there and he's working and he's got his commercial air and everything else. And he uses conical oil. Even more specific, if you're a scuba diver, obviously the car you should be driving is a Mustang. Yeah? Where's the scuba diver? Well, you take a look in the middle picture, there's a couple of scuba divers loading the gear into the back of a Mustang. I owned a Mustang once, a 66 Mustang, and I couldn't put much scuba gear in the back of it, but anyway, you get the idea. Here's another one. Now, look at this. Do you remember station wagons? Boy, when station wagons first came out, remember those big station wagons, Kevin? Big 47 feet long. They were so popular, apparently station wagons took over the market for a period of time. Try to buy one now. But there they are. They were fantastic big cars. And guess who they were good? They were good for? Scuba divers. This is before vans and before pickup trucks were only used by farmers back then. So there's a beautiful big station wagon, Mercury station wagon with half a dozen divers working out of the back of it. Triumph motorcycles. Pretty much any product at all. If you put a scuba diver in the picture, then that product was accepted as, hey, wild and crazy. This is what we need to get. Here's a kind of a neat one. It means a lot more to us here in Canada than it will to anybody else. Let's take a quick look at this one. You might wonder what the relationship is here. Well, there's a scuba diver, a single hose regulator, and his bulldog and so on. There's a little story in there about what you can do, what you can't do, and so on. And this particular ad is sponsored by the Canadian Bank of Commerce. We now know it as the CIBC, the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, but at one time it was called the Canadian Bank of Commerce. And they advertise their services and various things, and they used a scuba diver to help them advertise. Okay, how many of you remember this guy? He was pretty funny. One of my favorite comedians or actors, but he's pretty funny. Buddy Hackett. Yeah, Buddy Hackett. And he says it very simply, until I became a scuba diver, I was a nothing. I guess I could say that, couldn't I, Kevin? Yeah. Anyway, pretty interesting. Here's one I want to show. This is not really an ad, but this is a great old picture that I picked up some time ago, and it is kind of interesting. This is a picture out of, I think it's out of Time magazine when they were big format, big pictures, big format pictures. And here's a diver, and he's introducing his son to the sport of scuba diving. Isn't that something? And it's interesting because this little boy here, 6 years old, little pair of fins on, little mask. I have those masks and fins, you know. And obviously he's got a custom-made suit. They make wetsuits for kids that young. And he has on one of those floating scuba tanks. I think we did in this show. Didn't we do a video on that? Yeah. And you know, you put it in your mouth and you don't actually go underwater with it, you know. But isn't that a cute picture? Now, I want to leave the ladies out. I don't want to do that. No, ladies, you certainly have a place here in scuba diving. So here's a couple of ads for the ladies. Smart girls don't mask morning breath. They use Chlorodent. Okay. All right. Well, I said I had an ad for the ladies. Oh, here's another one. You'll get a kick out of this one, ladies. This is for women with more exciting things to do than scrub floors. I'm not too sure what the message is there, but there's an ad for a floor cleaner, and there's definitely a lady in scuba gear and with a spear gun too. And this, obviously, this floor cleaner will give you the time necessary so you can go scuba diving. Hey, nothing wrong with that. I have a lot more of these. I'll share some more of them in the future. But I just wanted to point out that at a certain period of time, 60s and 70s in particular, scuba diving was the sport. Wild and crazy. And you want to be a little bit wild and crazy, be on the leading edge of fun, you're a scuba diver. There you go. Hope you enjoyed that, guys. Vintage Scuba. Talk to you real soon. Alec Peirce.